Sure. Here is a 15-point summary of the article with elaboration on each point. Asterisk banks are not required to compensate customers for authorized transactions, even if tricked. This means that if you are tricked into authorizing a fraudulent transaction, your bank is not obligated to reimburse you for your losses. For example, if you receive a phishing email that looks like it is from your bank, and you click on a link in the email and enter your login credentials, scammers could then use that information to make unauthorized transactions from your account. In this case, even though you were tricked, the bank would not be responsible for reimbursing you because you authorized the transactions. Scammers use increasingly sophisticated methods, including impersonation and social engineering. Scammers are always coming up with new ways to trick people into giving them their personal information or money. Some common tactics include impersonating a bank or other trusted institution, sending phishing emails or text messages, and using social engineering to gain your trust. For example, a scammer might call you and claim to be from your bank's security department. They might tell you that your account has been compromised and that you need to verify your information. If you give them your personal information, they could then use it to steal your money. Data breaches give scammers access to personal information. Data breaches are a major problem that can give scammers access to your personal information, such as your name, address, social security number, and bank account information. This information can then be used to commit identity theft or other types of fraud. For example, if a scammer gets a hold of your social security number, they could use it to open new credit card accounts in your name. Lawmakers are considering placing more responsibility on banks to prevent fraud. There is a growing debate about how much responsibility banks should have to prevent fraud. Some lawmakers believe that banks should be required to do more to protect their customers from fraud, such as implementing stricter security measures. Others argue that banks already do enough and that placing more responsibility on them would simply drive up the cost of banking services. Financial institutions are required to investigate suspected fraudulent activity. If you believe that you have been the victim of fraud, you should contact your bank immediately. The bank is required to investigate your claim and determine whether the transaction was fraudulent. They must notify customers promptly if they discover unauthorized transactions. If the bank discovers that unauthorized transactions have been made from your account, they are required to notify you promptly. They must also credit your account for the amount of the unauthorized transactions. Banks are required to have a system in place to resolve customer disputes. If you disagree with the bank's decision about your fraud claim, you have the right to file a dispute. The bank is required to have a system in place to resolve customer disputes. Customers have the right to report fraud and request a provisional credit. If you believe that you have been the victim of fraud, you should contact your bank immediately and report the fraud. You can also request a provisional credit, which will temporarily credit your account for the amount of the fraudulent transactions. The bank has 10 business days to investigate and determine if the transaction was fraudulent. The bank has 10 business days to investigate your fraud claim and determine whether the transaction was fraudulent. If the bank determines the transaction was fraudulent, they must permanently credit the customer's account. If the bank determines that the transaction was fraudulent, they must permanently credit your account for the amount of the fraudulent transactions. If the bank determines the transaction was authorized, they can debit the customer's account again. If the bank determines that the transaction was authorized, they can debit your account again for the amount of the transaction. Customers can file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, if they believe their bank has not handled their fraud claim fairly. If you disagree with the bank's decision about your fraud claim, you can file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. The CFPB can investigate the bank's actions and order them to take steps to make things right. Customers can also sue their bank in civil court. If you are not satisfied with the CFPB's response to your complaint, you can also sue your bank in civil court.
Subscribe for more on this.